Now back to the show. This is The Law Show on CL 650.
All right, today we're talking about immigration law. Gordon Maynard and Alex Stojcevic are here from MKS Law, downtown Vancouver, immigration and citizen lawyers. Now, before the break, we were talking about if you want to bring parents, and it's just parents and grandparents, it's not siblings, right? You can bring into the country.
That's right.
So you have to say we have enough resources in the family to support this new person coming into the country. What's the number? I guess it changes depending on where you are.
I'm sorry?
The number you need to support that family member coming in.
All right, that's the minimum necessary income.
Yeah.
And it's determined by where you live according to a table produced by Stats Canada. It's a figure that is based on how large your family is.
Mm-hmm.
So the low-income cutoff figure, say for a family of 3, it's sitting at around, say, $25,000, something like that.
So it's not onerous.
Not onerous, but then you add in the parents' family that you're bringing in. Your
Mm-hmm.
2 parents if you're bringing them in, so now the number goes up to 5. If they have dependent children accompanying them, which is possible as long as the dependent children are young enough, you add those in. And then the government increased the number. They said not just meeting the low-income cutoff figure, but the low-income cutoff figure plus 30%. And you have to demonstrate that in each of the prior 3 tax years.
Oh, okay.
So,
like you could see that though in a city like Vancouver.
Yeah.
I mean, I had a family member move here as a Canadian citizen from the UK and lived here for a year and couldn't afford it really and decided to go back.
Yeah.
So I mean, doing a 30% premium on that kind of makes sense.
I don't think too many people have any complaint about requiring a certain financial fluidity in order to support your parents here. You're giving an undertaking that you're going to provide them with the necessaries. So.
But Alex, you were saying
that.
that.
I may disagree with my colleague for a moment. It was an election issue. In the Liberals' platform.
Isn't it everything an election issue in this immigration file?
Actually, there were very specific points of tension between the various platforms, the NDPs, the Liberals, and the Conservatives, and we had several shows that were dedicated to these. But one of the key differences there is that the feeling of the 3 years was a somewhat artificial number. Why distinguish between meeting it 1 year and meeting it in 3 years?
Mm-hmm.
It put an undue amount of pressure on parents to keep on or the sponsors to meet an artificial target over a course of time versus just one. And the complaint flowed from the fact that it's not like this is going to take 3 years or 1 year. It might take 4 for the parents to come, or 5. So what difference does it make if they make it for 3 years or if they make it for 1 year? I mean, it's supposed to be a snapshot. Why does it have to be?
Well, I'm going through a mortgage renewal, and they want 3-4 years. They want to know that I'm going to be able to pay the bills for the next 5 years. So you look at it either way.
I see. So so the way you've put it is an insurance risk issue.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let me put that into this context for you. In 2001, when the Liberals came to power in the province of British Columbia, it was discovered that 14% of parents and grandparents that had been sponsored by immigrants had defaulted on the 10-year undertaking that people gave that said, we'll be financially responsible for our parents for 10 years and they can't go on welfare.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the reality is there was a big default rate between 14 and 16% in British Columbia, and when the NDP were in power, they did nothing about enforcing it. The Liberals did an audit and started the BC Liberals, and under Gordon Campbell, and they started an enforcement program where they started suing people for the money that was paid out in welfare, put liens on people's houses, et cetera, et cetera. And the default rate went to 0 in British Columbia,
Mm-hmm.
pretty close to 0. So in terms of if the harm is enforcement,
yeah,
that's already happened.
So these people that you maybe are taking advantage of the system, is that basically
exactly.
what you're saying?
They don't exist so much.
They were defaulting on their undertaking.
They were defaulting. Like,
right.
oh, yeah, we promised that we're not going to. Now, under the Conservatives, I should add, it went from 10-year undertakings to 20-year undertakings.
Wow.
So if you bring your parents here, for 20 years, they're not entitled to social assistance.
And I think you were asking me earlier about the number crunching. I was looking at the figures for 2015.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, you were calculating them. What are the numbers about?
Total immigrants into Canada for
Right.
2015 maximus are 285,000.
Wasn't it supposed to be set at 250 each year?
It's always gone up a little bit above that.
Yeah.
285 is well within their range. It's the top end of their range, but it's within it. Of that, 65% are classified as economic immigrants. These are non-family. Family are not classified as economic immigrants. And it's not humanitarian. Humanitarian and family make up 35%, of which 25% is family. All right, so the vast majority of immigration to Canada is economic rather than family.
Someone looking for a job here.
Somebody who has a job here is what it's come down to.
Yeah, they have a job and you guys help bring them in.
They're not brought in by family sponsorship.
Right.
They're brought in by their own bootstraps.
Right.
In the past, 20 years ago, almost 30 years ago, family-related immigration to Canada was the majority of the immigration. And since that decades ago, the government has always been moving in successive governments to increasing the level of economic immigrants and diminish the number of family class immigrants.
Because the worry is that you have people that could drain on the system versus people that are contributing to the system.
Look, they don't like parents who put a drain on the system.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And the parents are not going to be paying income tax. They're not going to be earning income. They're not going to be helping the economy. They're going to cost money. We do it because we have a commitment to supporting family immigration in Canada under our program. But they don't want too many parents. That's why we have a quota on it. We used to bring in 20 and 30,000 a year. Now we bring in 5 and 10,000 a year.
Right.
So when you want to keep the numbers down, that lies behind the setting of the economic threshold.
Right.
In part, that drives the number of eligible sponsors, which controls the number of parents coming in.
There is a counter-argument to this, and policymakers of a certain stripe would argue that economic immigration is a mistake, and that family class immigration long-term is far better.
Stable, right?
Their argument is that when we say they're going to be a drain on the system, we're looking at very specific costs. We're looking at healthcare, we're looking at language training and things like that, settlement costs. But what we're not looking at is what they bring to the family. The child care that's free that otherwise has to be paid for, the ability for a second income earner to go out and be productive, the ability over time for the family to not worry and not have to send money overseas, which is ultimately capital going to the Philippines or going to Mexico.
But in some instances, there's money coming in with the parents too. They might
Right.
sell
In
property.
some cases.
In some cases,
Often, and look, people work later. I mean, we have lots of our clients who are parents and grandparents who work part-time and who do actually contribute to the economy.
And there's a lot to be said about the cultural aspect of promoting family unification.
But it provides more stable society, right? You've got family around, but you're absolutely right. And,
there's fewer costs associated with it. Look, if you have a family member who's going to walk you to get your first bus pass and who's going to teach you how to, or go with you to Service Canada to get a social insurance number, those are benefits that other people have to try to navigate on their own. So you have often longer-term, more stable outcomes from family class than you do even with the best and brightest. Because with the best and brightest, they're the best and brightest in Vancouver, but they're also the best and brightest in LA, in London, and everywhere else.
I was going to ask you that. Of the people that are coming in because they've got a job and they're moving to Canada, you might not, I'm not sure if anybody tracks this, how many of them leave after that, after a certain amount of time, versus family members who probably come and stay? Right?
We do a terrible job traditionally in Canada of tracking them. A very distinguished colleague of ours, a very good friend of Gordon's, Michael Green, who's a very good lawyer in Calgary, for many, many years, this was his lament, that Canada needs to do a better job of tracking out migration. Yeah, sure, this is how many people we took in, but how many did we lose?
Yeah.
How many did we lose to Silicon Valley last month? How many did we lose to other jurisdictions? And, and that's part of the story that people don't like to talk about within immigration policy.
I'd like to take a step back and tie Alex's comments back to the initial problem that you were talking about, which is the applications that went to Mississauga by courier, and they filled up the quota within 1.5 days.
That's it, 1.5 days.
1.5 days. A quota of 10,000. I think they took in 14,000 applications and said that's it. Our quota's 10,000. So, getting back to the interest that we see in family class sponsorship, looking at the numbers that we have, the 65, 25, 10 split of family class members versus the rest of immigration, one of the answers to the problem is bring in more parents, to not be a slave to this 25% number, to start moving it back up to the 30%, 35%, and recognize family immigration for the benefits that it does bring and not just tied to economic considerations. That's going to solve some of the problems. All right, but admittedly, for those of us that work in the business and see governments struggle with these matters year by year, either wisely or not wisely, we do recognize that it's something that requires management, and it's difficult to manage. You have to have good systems to do it, and that costs money. So you're balancing a lot of interests here, policy, resources, time considerations, costs. Tough to do, but that's a solution that they could have. I think I would support raising the number of parents that come into the country.
New government, new name for the ministry. new attitude? Have you seen any change?
Well, there is already, and one of their policy platforms was they would allow 10,000 a year, not 5, and they've retroactively done that.
So when the doubling up with mom and dad, that could be over 20,000.
Very possible.
People,
yeah.
right?
Absolutely, absolutely. So you've already seen that change, and to some extent, it's because it was part of their policy mandate. It was part of their immigration plan that was announced September 30th, and it's the second thing that they've now done as part of that plan. The first thing being their refugee commitment. The second thing was doubling the number of parents and grandparents.
Those are quick and dirty things that they can do to make an impact. Some other changes are going to need to be taken that require a longer period of time and more discourse.
And I mean, to circle back to, the problem is, we discuss this in terms of, I have to do something with mom and dad, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, that problem hasn't gone away because you didn't make it this year, right?
Yeah.
So what happens now is, and this is another value that we can add, is it's maybe time to look at other alternatives. And I mean, this is something that we can assist people with, and that, immigration lawyers with some experience with this system can look at. Maybe there's another way you can do this. Maybe they can qualify in an economic category. Maybe there's a humanitarian and compassionate application that could be made. Maybe a parent and grandparent situation like a super visa is the appropriate way to go. There could be alternatives for them, and we'd encourage everybody who is caught in that situation to look at those other alternatives, and we can certainly help with that.
All right, we are speaking with Gordon Maynard and Alex Stoychevich. Sorry, I apologize. Getting your name right, because it's the first time we've met, but we're neighbors. We've seen each other around the neighborhood. MKS Law in downtown Vancouver, immigration and citizenship lawyers, and their website is vancouverlaw.ca, which is very easy to remember, vancouverlaw.ca, talking about families, bringing families together. It used to be called family reunification. What's it called now officially?
Parents and grandparents, a subset of the family class.
All right, so when we come back, I want to talk about the refugees that have come to Canada recently, or still coming, the impact it's had on the resources that are being put towards your business, the super visas and the provincial regulations, and how it might be an alternative to getting people into the country. When we return on The Law Show on CL 650.
There's more of the show still ahead. This is The Law Show on CL 650.